I just want to give you the information so that you have it, so that we can then discuss, move forward, and answer specific questions that you have. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully it works. All right. Loading. Okay, can everyone see that? Okay, awesome. Thanks for the thumbs up, Maria. Okay, so we're just going to get into it a little bit about grant application and also a lot about grant management. So really the first part is how to build a strong grant application, right? So this is really the first part. So when you are working in an organization, your goal should not be to just go find grants, right? Like you sort of often hear like, we just need money, but that's really not the place to start. So really the place to start is by defining your organizational needs. So what would you like? These are just some questions that you might ask yourself. So what would you do if you had funding that would be innovative for your community, your state, your region, for multiple partners? Who could you partner with to make this happen? And who else may be interested in supporting your vision? So it's not about sort of bending your mission to the grant opportunity that you find, but it's really about starting from a place of, what does my organization need? If we had a little bit of resource, what could we do? Right. So you start with that as sort of your North Star goal. So this is not a comprehensive list, again, of how to all the kinds of grants that there are, or how to locate all of them, but generally this has been where my experience is. So there are like federal opportunities, state opportunities, private foundation and community foundation opportunities. So you have to understand, for a grant that you're interested in, first of all, like which kind of opportunity is it? Because it's going to significantly impact the kind of proposal that you put together, the kind of project you may want to do. So any like federal and state opportunities are going to be released publicly, right? So they're called different things depending on the organization that releases them, but they are available publicly on websites. Often, like federal agencies have really great newsletters that go out about all the potential funding opportunities that they have. And some states do this pretty well as well. So they're available publicly. They may be housed in the agency clearinghouse, or they may be like, you can, of course, there's like the Federal Register. So multiple places that you could find federal and state opportunities, but they are available publicly. Private and community foundations, I typically like think of these relationships as being more, or these kind of foundational or grant awards are more relationship oriented in nature. You might have a situation where a foundation and their priority funding areas are typically available on their website. You have to know that if you don't have a relationship with a potential new funder, but you're really aligned, you have to figure out how to build that relationship first. There are several private and family foundations that, it will say these are all the areas that we work in, and then at the bottom of the website it will say we are not accepting unsolicited proposals, right? So you just have to know what it is and how the process works for the kind of funding that you're going after. And you can do this by potentially looking at who they funded if you have relationships with any of those organizations, or if you work in the same sorts of networks. You might ask, you may like meet someone at a conference. Is a great way to like forge a connection and follow up via email, but it's a slow relationship building process typically, where you're not gonna like build that intentional relationship necessarily with like a public entity. So some of the best places that I've found through my work at the Hub, the Hub is a statewide nonprofit, really focused on growing the community development system and the local capacity of communities across West Virginia. So I will say that with that community development lens on, these are the best places and have been the strongest resources for our work at the Hub. So One place that's been more recent is the Biden Interagency Working Group on Coal and Power Plant Communities and Economic Revitalization. They send out a great newsletter. I think there were like 40 opportunities or something in the most recent newsletter that they sent. I would sign up for their listserv. Another great resource is the Ready Nonprofits has a free grant station membership, and you can like apply through that to sort of go through the grant station opportunities and see if they're a good fit to you and to your organization. And then finally, these are just some of the federal agencies that we've worked with who I think have really fantastic grant outreach. They just have really great award opportunity outreach. So they're like sending newsletters, they're hosting webinars multiple times prior to submission deadlines to answer questions. They have program officers who will answer your questions into a proposal submission. So it's like a case where if you're building a grant application, you never really want to like get to a place where you're pushing submit and you haven't had clarifying questions or like built some sort of relationship or connection to a program officer. It's you don't want to do this blindly. They're there to help you. So then I think that probably the thing that is probably the most salient point is like, are you going to pursue the grant, right? These are all of the questions that you need to go through. Is your organization qualified to apply for the grant as outlined in the notice of funding announcement? Or if it's the case of a private foundation, does your work align with their priority areas? You will be wasting your time and theirs if your organization is focused on reuse, for example, and it's very clear on the foundation's website that they support like health initiatives, and you cannot make a clear link about that, right? Or after school kids programming or something like so. I'm saying that because you don't want to just send out blanket letters and ruin relationships straight out of the gate. Do you have the right partners in place? Are roles and expectations clear? So we never go it alone at the hub. We're always working with partners, and the partnership expectations have to be really clear before you go into the grant. So if they're going to be receiving a portion of the award, how much is their portion? Are they a sub-awardee? Are they a co-applicant? You have to define all of these things. And then do you have the data needed for your statement of need? In some cases, there will be like an award from an agency, from a federal agency, maybe like a two-step process. The ARC Power Program is a great example of this. They will give power planning grants because if you don't have clear data about what the problem is, they will give you a small planning grant to get that data and to understand the need, and then to launch the larger project to address the need. So sometimes you may be after a planning grant if you cannot answer this question, like what is the need? Do you have the data to support that need? And then likewise, you have to be able to measure your impact, right? So are your project outcomes, your measurement, your evaluation systems clear, right? So if it is not clear to you how you will address impact or what that looks like, you should slow down. Does the grant require cash match? We see this as one of the biggest barriers to application. And what cash match means for those who aren't super familiar with grants, especially on federal opportunities, in the notice of funding, it will say, like, we are making this many awards, we have this pot of money, the maximum award amount is this, the minimum award amount is this, and we would encourage applications, but it's always like but you will need to have like 20% cash match. So the total, if your total award is, I'm going to do math on the spot, but if the funding proposal can come in, at $100,000 for your entire project, can you provide do you have $20,000 either through you or partners? Do you have $20,000 to contribute to the program? And that this is one of the biggest barriers for folks applying. Will you have the ability to find and secure committed match funding prior to the submission deadline? We've seen folks be really creative about how to find that match, and we can talk about that. But a lot of notices really state that it has to be unencumbered, committed, and available before they will give you the award. And it has to be that during the application process. So then the other, this next bullet is really about, do you have compliance systems in place, like audits, bidding, procurement, reporting? Like, do you have the financial and evaluation systems? Do you have the capacity within your organization to actually manage the grant? And then do you have enough time to pull together all the elements required for a competitive proposal? You really need to get it in at least 2 to 3 days before the due date. We've seen multiple cases. We've had several stories from communities where they were ready to submit major proposals that would have transformed the community, and the portal breaks, right? Like the portal breaks the day that it's due, and you can't wait until the date it's due to submit it, because the deadline for federal grants is the deadline. They will not extend the deadline due to their portal breaking. They won't extend the deadline if you lose power, or if your whole block loses power. You have to figure out how you're going to get to a location where you can upload and submit a report by the deadline, no exceptions. So you're like, okay, I can answer all those questions with confidence. Super. So now I'm ready to make the application. And so I really like to make a checklist with the deadlines about all the required sections and documents, and really back up from the proposal due date to do this. So last year we submitted our submission. It was for the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA's Rural Community Development Initiative, which we use to fund and support our HubCap initiative, which is our Communities of Achievement program. It's our advanced level coaching program at the Hub. And I worked on this grant every day for 2 months, right? And so, like, you really need to understand if it's something that you can realistically do. If you're 2 weeks out and you as Alyssa had this like massive 200-page document, can you actually put it together with the time that you have? So that's something to be real about, and then go together and put together all the elements and make a timetable and a schedule for yourself so that you stay on track. It will take you longer to track down all of the necessary documents and put together everything that you need than what you think it will. So basically, like, I'm not saying that all grant applications are the same. My best advice when grant writing is to answer the questions, right? Like, it's about being a good writer, it's about offering good data, but ultimately it's about like fully answering the questions in the space that you have. So, but generally the sections are like, what is the statement of need? Like, why is there a need for what you're proposing, which is like including data. So again, having good data and being able to like pull that data from sources. Sometimes the grant proposal, or like the request, or the notice of funding will actually stipulate which data to use. So you should really pay attention to that. Again, the RCDI application that we did last year required a very specific data set, and it wasn't the most recent census data. It was like a very just finding the data was really difficult to like run run the right queries to get the correct data. But if you give yourself time, you can find it and you can definitely work through it. Also, what is your organization's capacity and ability to meet that need? Or you and your partners, right? So like, why are you uniquely situated to address the need that you've outlined? This is when you say, we have the expertise, we have the experience, we have the desire, we're connected to the community. Like, what is it that makes you special? So you need to think about why you're uniquely positioned to do that. Then you need to, of course, have like your goals or your outcomes, your measurement, and your evaluation systems in place. Then generally there will be some kind of project timeline, a general project budget. You also need to be clear. Sometimes they have you use like a template or a form that they require. Sometimes you can upload your own. So you need to have clarity about like what that is. And also, do they want the overall project budget? Or do they want what your proposed ask is from them, right? So like, do they want your share to a foundation or to a federal agency, or do they want to see the entire scope of the project budget? I will tell you that several funders like to see that they are not the only ones who have gone in on supporting this project. So if you can pull together multiple funding sources into the project budget, I think that makes your proposal stronger. It also makes it stronger if you have committed match, or if you have community match or match from partner organizations. It shows everyone has a little bit of skin in the game. And then additionally, you'll have to secure like letters of support. If partners are securing match or contributing match, excuse me, they will have to like provide letters for that. You may have like organizational letters of support from other partners or from community members. And then any organizational attachments like they may ask for. So you might need to upload your most recent audit, your current list of your board of directors, like your most recent 990. I'm trying to think like what else we've been asked for. But yeah, you just need to follow the directions. Like all of those attachments are generally specified. And then the last sort of word of warning is the SAM.gov is the system of award management through the government. And if you are going after a federal award, that is not the time to find out your SAM registration has expired, or realize that you don't have one. So you really need to do that as soon as possible so that you're not trying to renew your SAM, which is like can sometimes have a long runway. You really need to make sure that that is current and up to date, and you're not like lagging or behind. Okay, so I'm gonna quickly kind of go through this. Y'all, I am so excited because West Virginia, we have these new West Virginia Grant Resource Centers. And so for those of you in West Virginia, I know we've got a lot of Ohio folks and other folks on the call, but we have this great resource in West Virginia that's just started. And it's a project that's happening in partnership between Marshall and WVU. So I wanted to spotlight a little bit about what the West Virginia Grant Resource Centers do for folks looking for grant writing and proposal development and help. So their mission is to help small communities and other eligible applicants maximize federal and private dollars from grant applications to support economic development initiatives across the state, and it is 100% free. This is their team. They're great. Again, I'm going to share this presentation later, but I know a lot of these folks, and they are just stellar at what they do. So some of, again, like you'll hear things echoed based on what I just said, but part of their pre-award process is exactly doing what I've just given you in the checklist, like plan development, identify the funding source, do some grant prep, like looking at all the identified requirements, metrics identified, letters of support, and then submitting. What I love about the Grant Resource Center is they actually have developed checklists for awards that like several organizations or agencies may be going after. And so they have checklists already developed, perhaps that you could use or borrow as you're developing your proposal. It's really handy. So this is like some of what they will do. They'll facilitate connections. They will help with research and pulling statistics or helping you through that. They do host workshops and convenings. They have fact sheets. They offer grant writing certification. They leverage their university assets. So if they know of folks who could be partners within the university or help with elements of your proposal, they can connect to that. They build the grant writing capacity in others, and they do have an annual report. So And then again, this is more for if you're located in West Virginia and you need help from them, you should absolutely go to them. They are wonderful. Okay, I will take a breath. This is part two. So part one, I will say is really important, right? But part two is more geared for folks if you've ever been in a position where you said, "Oh, I wrote this grant. I didn't think in my wildest dreams like it was competitive or that we would get it. Oh shoot, like now we have to do this, right? Like, oh no, we promised all these outcomes. Now we have to do this. Or, oh my goodness, we are managing all these dollars that are, you need to be hyper accountable for. And maybe we don't have the systems in place to do that yet, or we're not ready. So this is more for you've received the grant, now what? And you really need to start this process long before you receive the grant. So I'll say that. So you must like manage your project outcomes progress. You need to manage your project financials, and you need to communicate and ask questions. And I'm talking about in relationship with your program officer. I am not a lawyer. I am not an accountant. This is meant to be like a general overview. Please don't sue me. I'm just trying to offer advice from my firsthand perspective. You should definitely seek legal uh, uh, or professional accounting services if you need them, and to set things up for your organization if you don't have some of these things in place already. I will say that as a basic disclaimer. Please don't come after me. Um, internal organization, the first thing you want to do is okay, so maybe you've heard that your application is still in the pipeline or it's still alive. Sometimes they'll let you know, okay, you're a semifinalist, or like they'll come back with questions. So that's when you really need to think about, okay, if we get this, what do we need to have in place in order to manage this? At the hub, we set a lot of internal systems to track progress based on the submitted outcomes and project timeline. So what are those like reporting templates going to look like? How are we going to like track this from month to month? Then you need to schedule regular grant management meetings internally and with your partners. So this is not something that you want to be only visiting once every 4 months or something when the grant report is due. Everyone will be miserable if that's the only way that you're communicating. And then you really need to review any grant management instructions that you've received and set meetings with your program officer as needed. You will have additional questions more than what has been provided, I am sure. And you need to be really clear reading through those grant agreements or through any grant management instructions that you're given. I'm speaking specifically from a federal agency, but even from a private funder, in your award letter, it will say what that reporting needs to look like, how often it needs to happen, what the disbursement schedule is going to be. So you need to figure out all of this with your grant officer and go back to them with questions as you have them. Then you have to really make sure that all of your financial systems are set up. And this is a lot of the work that I do at the hub. So the first thing you have to do is make sure that you have really clear board of fiscal policies and that you're set up to follow them. Now is not the time to determine that you don't have like, that you have deficits or you don't know how to invoice or move money or keep money segregated if you have federal funds. So you really need to have clear fiscal policies before you go after any award. Then you need to sort of set up your financial tracking spreadsheets for your budget and any sub-awardees. So if you are going to be the lead organization or the lead applicant, and you're going to be like processing money through to your sub-awardees as partners, you need to have like MOUs and sub-award agreements sort of executed with your sub-awardees about what that timing is going to look like, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen, etc. You need to be able to track both whatever award you receive, if it's like a federal or state award, and matching funds, right? You have to be able to track both of those within the systems that you have. And if it's not clear to you, you need to seek an accountant or someone who has knowledge about how to track those separately. And then you really need to be clear before you go into the grant how you're going to move the money. So if the grant is only going to be on like 100% reimbursement basis, then usually for us it's like you turn in a report every 3 months, and then you say these were all the expenses we incurred during this period, and then we receive the reimbursement, generally within some sort of time frame. Sometimes it's 2 weeks, sometimes it's 30 days, sometimes it's a couple months it takes. So if you are doing a reimbursement only grant, will your organization have the cash flow to get you through to when the reimbursement happens? If you've spent, like, if it was like a big period where you like put a lot of costs, like a lot of expenses out the door for your project. So those are really something that you need to like look at your financial accounting system. Like, are we going to have cash flow issues if it's reimbursement only? If you can do advances, so like an advance is like when you're projecting, this is what I'm going to spend in the next period, that's great. There's like much stronger rules that vary from federal agency to federal agency about how long you can sit on advances, how long you have to disperse them, and what that process looks like. And you just need to be really clear from the agency of what that needs to look like. Some of them require you to turn it around in just a few days. Sometimes, you have a longer runway. Where you can spend down in advance. But either way, you need to know what that process is going to be and have real clarity, especially if you're going to get into any cash flow issues. Okay, audit preparedness. We all know that we love to talk about audits. So the best place to start is really becoming familiar with the 2 CFR Part 200 and keep it as a close resource and reference. So for those of you who don't know, if you expend $750,000 or more of federal funding during your fiscal year, this triggers what's called single audit. And so the single audit requirement will also apply to like any subrecipients on a grant. The cool thing is that you can study for the test by looking up your program in the OMB compliance supplement. This is something that like auditors are really familiar with. So if you are already engaging an audit firm every year for your organization's annual audit, and they're doing their you do that in tandem with your 990 or something, you've probably got the systems in place. What you need to do is it might behoove you, if you know that you're going to be like triggering this single audit, to talk with your auditors about systems that you need to set up to make sure that you're ready for that test. So they may need to do more testing during the regular general audit. They may provide you some feedback so that you can put those recommendations into place before you trigger the single audit. So some of the documentation examples needed for the single audit. Again, I'm not an auditor. I'm not an accountant, but these are some of the kinds of things that you will have to have to just be in compliance, right, with stewarding these dollars. So for like payroll and benefits, you need to have pay stubs or detailed reports from payroll. You need to have adequate time and effort tracking. You'll need to have employee job descriptions and resumes. You'll need to have like your employee benefit policies and their allocation rate calculation. So you sort of need everything around payroll and benefits to be really clear. Then like for other program expenses, you have to have like itemized receipts for supplies and any micro expenses. So for us, we keep like mileage logs and calculation for travel for our staff. And then you'll also need to have itemized receipts for any travel expenses. And then you also need to like be really familiar with the federal procurement process. So you need to have procurement policies that are clear within your organization, and you need to document those. So you need to follow your organization's policies and document those. The federal procurement guidelines are a really great place to start, but I would tell you that they are minimums, right? I will say like this is a minimum. And so like at within the hub, we've made it like more restricted. So those are like you think of them as floors. Like, you know, this would, this would be the minimum amount that you could spend before you need to, put out an RFQ, or before you need to like document this purchase request. So you need to like make sure that you have really clear procurement policies and that you're following them. You need to have a contract and a scope of work for folks, for organizations or services you've procured. You need to have invoice, and you need to have proof of payment for any expenses that have required procurement. A note about match. So you can't just say, all right, I'm going to do all of that with my federal funds and I'm just going to use match like loosey goosey over here. You cannot do that. You have to track your match and your match spending with the same level of rigor as any state and federal funds that you use. And it has to be rigorous both for the primary grant awardee and any subrecipients or subawardees named on the project. So if you are the primary applicant and you have subrecipients or subawardees and folks under you, you have to do a risk assessment to understand, do they also have the internal systems set up to keep track of these receipts and these invoices and the time and effort in the same way that you're tracking them? How much of that will you require from them when like turning in a report for reimbursement? How much of it is like outlined, like they will keep track of it, but you could call on it or ask for it at any time. Like sometimes that's a way you might set up the subaward agreement. It's really interesting because there is no one size fits all for match. So some federal grant awards allow for other federal grant awards to be used as match. I should say match, not much, and some don't. So you need to be clear about which it is before applying to the grant and be in compliance. So for example, the Appalachian Regional Commission, ARC's Power Program, does allow for federal grant awards to be used as match in that program. It cannot always go the other way. So like if you're applying to an EDA program or USDA or Department of Transportation money and you have ARC funds, you have to look at the notice of funding to understand whether or not match can be used the other way. So those are all like great questions to get answers from your program officer as you're setting up your budgets and things. So federal procurement, you can read, you'll get this later, but basically, again, it's just setting like the minimums for procurement and what the regulations are from the 2 CFR Part 200. And then last but not least, portal familiarity. So you need to understand how you turn in reports and how do you draw down funds. Sometimes it's an email with attachments to a program officer. Sometimes it is a formal portal. Again, you want to know and be familiar with the systems that you're being asked to use. You need to build a reporting calendar and schedule. It is really easy to sort of think, oh, I'll just do this, and suddenly you need like there's a glitch, or you need more time to run the financials or something before reports due. So make sure you have really clear multiple deadlines into when the report is due for yourself, and then communicate that with your program officer. So if there's anything that has changed, like maybe part of the grant was being able to hire another person or two or something. If you had a slow hiring timeline and so you haven't spent out as much as what you projected, or your outcomes are a little bit lagging, say that in your narrative for the grant report. If there are project activities that have experienced delays, communicate that. If you're having challenges with the portal, they will help you. They know oftentimes better than you. Like if the portal is broken, if it's wonky, they will be able to make back-end changes that you will not typically. And then if you need to do a budget adjustment, please do not communicate with your program officer in the last period of the last year of your grant that you need to be shifting around more than 10% line items across categories in your budget. You need to be communicating if the scope of work is changing, if the partners change, if the personnel changes, if you need to make significant changes, you need to communicate those needs. And often it's just a simple budget adjustment conversation and saving some emails. Sometimes is documentation, but they go through it differently. So you just need to be clear and communicating consistently with your program officer about these kinds of challenges. So there's all sorts of like, I sort of look at it in these three buckets. So during the performance period, you should be completing the subaward agreements, conducting risk assessments for your subawardees, setting up these narrative of financial reporting templates and sharing those with subawardees too if you're asking them to do that. You're going to be like doing all of these things during closeout, which is like tracking down all these details, all the substantiating evidence, any attachments or evidence that you have from the work as part of the narrative support. And then you need to submit the report and follow up. So just make sure, again, this was from an ARC proposal, but make sure that you follow up with your officer. Hey, I submitted it. It seemed to have gone through. And then dispersing payment, make sure like the documentation is accurate for the report that you've submitted and you've like closed up the period successfully. So that was about as fast as I could go. But our website is there, and that's our office phone. And you're always welcome to email me. I'm k.loudin@wvhub.org. If you have like more specific questions that you think I might be able to answer. So I'm gonna stop sharing now.
That was great, Katie. Thank you so much. Definitely some of the things that you said, I was going, oh, yes, we may or may not have done that before and not in the way that you've advised. So yes, lots of really good. I was like taking snips of the screen for like, especially I think the checklist and things like that. So I do want to open it up for any clarifying questions. Feel free to unmute yourself if you have some questions as well, or you can put them in the chat and I can read them out loud.
Yeah, I have a question. This is Molly. I haven't thought it out all the way, so it might be a little messy, but I guess I feel some push and pull with writing applications in a way that are ambitious about what metrics you're gonna achieve and like look competitive, I guess, to a funder's eyes. Like, wow, we're gonna, make all this change, and then that day comes when you're like, oh dang, we have to like do this, and then you've like maybe set yourselves up to do more than is reasonable. Do you have any like advice on how to make a competitive application with still achievable and reasonable metrics?
Yeah, I think that that's really hard. We're pretty ambitious at the hub too. And it doesn't, it doesn't always go according to plan. So I think that you need to set up metrics in a really clear like timeline. I know that it's that you may think about like sort of stacking your metrics. So if it's a 3-year project, what would success look like at the end of year 1 and year 2 and year 3? And those may be more manageable bites to think about what's the arc of the work, because that can be sort of overwhelming to me. But like, what can you actually do within a year or within 6 months? And that may help to break down something that's more manageable. In my experience, funders would want something that would have impact and be able to be measured. No one's under any illusions that you are going to fix everything, right? And so I think being really clear about what we're going to do, what the partners' roles are, and really bring your partners in to help write those metrics. Because they may actually have like a great way for measuring something that you're not like considering or you're not currently employing. But yeah, I mean, I hear your question. I don't have like a great solution. It's just like, be honest with yourself. If you stretched a little bit, if you leveraged the knowledge of your partners, what could you do? And then I've also found that this is why the relationship with the funder is so important, because if something happens and you're going to be delayed, they would rather hear that you're going to be delayed than it's not going to happen at all, or that it's going to be like ambiguous somehow, or that you need to modify because, oh, like you were going to host all these community meetings and now a pandemic has happened and you can't hold anything in person, right? And so there are going to be environmental shifts that happen that will impact the work. And so I would just say, like, funders have been through this, and so I think the best strategy really is to set what you think you can do, set it in partnership, and then really be very communicative if expectations are not aligning with reality and what you're doing to pivot.
Thanks. Yeah, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question too. That I was thinking about, like the partnerships, like in your experience, are you like hosting regular meetings that are kind of with like some of your key networking partners that you tend to go with for on grants so that you're on the same page, and then like you have kind of a maybe like a wish list of items that you or projects that you'd like to work on, and then you're, when grants come up, then you're like, okay, we have this idea. Because I feel like in our program, we tend to be pretty reactive of like, oh, this grant came out. Now let's like, yeah, I mean, exactly what you said in the beginning, which we shouldn't be doing. But are you like holding regular meetings with the partners to just kind of like have brainstorming sessions? Like, what are your community needs? Things like that.
Yeah, so I would say that we're doing both at the hub. We do have partners that approach us who say, oh, we could really use the hub's like facilitation capacity or community access for this project. And we're always happy to have that conversation. Sometimes it's a fit and sometimes it's not. But the hub does a lot of systems building work. And so we convene the Community Collaborative Network, which is a network of folks in multiple sectors who are connected to the community development system in some way across West Virginia, and they are constantly talking about what the needs are, what the opportunities are. So we're really aware of like what things are before they occur. We also actually happening today is the USDA Rural Partners Network meeting in Southern West Virginia. And so again, that's a space where in the ecosystem, we know that there are housing needs, that there are infrastructure needs, that there are economic development and revitalization needs. So we're in those conversations and in those partnerships proactively so that we can leverage the work when it needs to happen, right? Like when the right opportunity pops up. The relationships are already in place, the arc of the work is already in place. And so really it's about like finding the good match to support the work that we need, that we know like needs to happen. And so those are a couple things. We have the Downtown Appalachia Working Group. That's another group that we're pretty involved with. So and then we just have like multiple partnership meetings that are happening sometimes on a monthly basis, sometimes they're like on a project basis, but we're pretty connected to the community development system. And we're already moving forward the work, and so we already have needs identified. So we can answer the question like, if there was a little bit of money to address this need, like what would it look like? And we're pretty ready for it. Not perfectly ready, but pretty ready.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
With a little bit of pre-planning, it can go save probably a lot of work and heartache throughout the process.
Yeah, Neil, that's great. I do want to say that, I was at the Appalachian Funders Network convening a few weeks ago, which I know is like the sister organization to CAN, and this no one is under any illusion that the faucet from the federal government dollars out into communities and into rural investments is going to be forever, right? So it's about like quickly mobilizing to maximize the impacts in Appalachia and in like rural and distressed communities. while it's on, because it may not be here forever. So I think, it really behooves us as a region to really, yeah, to be competitive and to stand in the work that we know is worthwhile, and bring more investment to the region. So thanks, Neil. I know he's gone, but this is a great comment in the chat.
Yeah. Excellent. Any other questions for Katie? And we will be sharing out the presentation slides. So Katie very graciously said that we could share those out. So we can share them out for our networks too. I mean, that's great information, really good tidbits. Like I said, the checklist, I was like, oh, I want this. So yeah, we'll be sending that out along with our notes. So good.
I could ask one more. I know I asked one of you, but I have a question about like relationships with ongoing funders. And I guess year after year, sometimes when we've had a funder, it's hard to not just like, okay, how do I say this? We want to continue funding the work we're doing and not just have projects that start and end after the funding ends. And so it's hard. I think it's hard to go to the same funder and be like, we just want to keep doing the same stuff. So then it's like, well, we have to have a new element to this. And then you're like, well, we can't do a new thing every year because we have capacity. Like, I don't know. Any tips on those on?
No, I don't have any tips. I also feel this frustration. I also think that like I was in this call the other day, really talking about how slow philanthropy has been to like adjust for inflation and the increased costs that we're experiencing. Like, we're not operating in 2018 dollars as far as impact. And I think that there's a lot of education and education through relationships that needs to happen about like what your investment in our organization can do. I think that it's an ongoing dialogue. So instead of sort of writing the proposal and then hiding from your funder because you've got your head buried in the work until you turn in the report 1 year later, that's not really the way to go. The way to go is to bring the funder in to your work so they can see firsthand the challenges that you're experiencing and be in a conversation and a dialogue with them about your work, about the needs that you're seeing in the ecosystem before it's time to write the new proposal. Because I've actually found, there are several program officers that have a much better sense of the ecosystem and other opportunities, or partners who may be doing similarly aligned work, where you could be learning together or partnering in new ways or regionalizing. So again, it's like not great, especially if like folks just get to an impasse where they have to dig their heels in the sand to say, like, we're not providing general operating support or something. And that's what you need. But I think to be clear about your needs and demonstrating impact and doing that regularly, instead of just like waiting like for a whole year to pass when you like turn in your report and say thanks. So I would say that the best way is probably just to engage them as a thought partner. Open up your books and bring them into the challenge with you and ask if they have advice, because they've been they've been really helpful in my experience. So yeah, really, yeah, I see your comment, Molly. So.
That's a great point. I think sometimes I think of program officers on the grants as this like scary, like federal agency thing sometimes. So the idea of just being, but I like that. That's great advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we are at time. So want to be respectful of everybody's time. Thank you so much, Katie, for joining us and spreading your wisdom and your experience with